Okay, we're a couple minutes past the bottom of the hour, and looks like we've got everyone on. If there are any latecomers, oh, here we go. We've just got a couple more attendees coming in. Perfect. All right. Well, in that case, we'll go ahead and get started here. Hello again, and if you're just joining, welcome to the latest installment in our Skuid Deep Dive webinar series. And today we're going to be talking about one of my favorite elements in the most recent Skuid release, the Design Systems Studio, or DSS, as you may later hear me refer to it. So we're going to take a look at just how the new DSS enables you to deliver beautiful design systems for your Skuid applications. And to really dig into this topic today, I'm going to assume at least some basic familiarity with Skuid. So if this is your first exposure to Skuid, it's really not a problem. You can always find the previous Intro to Skuid webinar on our website, and obviously we would always love to have a call with you to introduce you a little bit further. But to give you at least a little context, if this is your first exposure to Skuid, Skuid is a low-code application development platform that allows you to build beautiful applications leveraging data from the systems you already have. So what does that mean for you? In a statement, Skuid exists to make your existing systems more valuable and ultimately your end users' lives a lot easier. A little bit about me. My name is Sam Alexander. I'm one of the pre-sales engineers, or sales engineers as some other companies call it, here at Skuid. And I'll be leading today's session. So quick agenda for us. It'll be a decently short webinar. We're expecting about 30 minutes or so today. And we've already knocked out the first of this agenda. So congratulations to us. We've done introductions. Next, I'm going to dive into a quick Design Systems Studio overview. Just introduce a bit of the background. Why does it exist? What value does it offer within the Skuid ecosystem? And what does it mean for your business? And then we're going to dive into a quick demo from there. I'll introduce you guys to the Design Systems Studio interface. We'll click around and we'll show the power of the DSS in real time. And then we'll finish up with some questions in closing. So if any questions arise throughout the webinar, feel free to go to the questions section of the GoToWebinar panel. Go ahead and enter the questions in there as they come to you, but we'll go ahead and address those at the end of the end of the webinar. We'll have some designated time for that. And we'll make sure that you guys leave with a good understanding of the Skuid DSS. So without further ado, let's jump into a quick rhetorical question, because everybody loves audience participation. Are employees actually using your business apps? Now, there's two answers to this question, right? There's yes or no. It's pretty binary. But there are also some qualifiers to this question. So, for example, if yes, how well and how often are they utilizing your business systems? Or is their motivation for using your applications a bit more stick than carrot? Are they only in there because their jobs depend on it? And if no, are they turning to another alternative? Is there something else they're using? Or are they just going completely rogue and operating entirely analog, writing their day's tasks on note cards or something like that? So to get all of us into the same camp, let me change this question slightly. Are employees actually enjoying using your business apps? And that's an important distinction. And for the majority of customers that I work with as a sales engineer here at Skuid, the answer to this question is initially no for the majority of those people. And whether or not users are actually enjoying interacting with your business systems can have a huge impact on the business. And we'll get into that here in just a moment. But first, I want to talk about what are some systems we enjoy using? What does that even look like to enjoy a system? Well, let's look at some consumer-facing applications and websites to get a feel for that. So what sort of systems are we using every day? What systems do we keep going back to without anyone telling us to do so? What are we using just because we want to? Well, I've listed a few here. And we use all of these systems every day of our own volition because each one is adding some value, or we're viewing it as adding some value to our everyday lives. We look to apps like Instagram and websites like Amazon to help us do some job that we deem valuable. So, for example, I could be looking to Instagram to help with keeping up with friends, promoting my small business, or maybe following news stories. But there's more. The reason why we choose Amazon over some other online retailer, and there's definitely a lot of other online retailers these days, or the reason we choose Instagram over some other social media platform, there's definitely alternatives. The reason why we choose those or whichever ones that you guys adopt, the reason is because those systems help us do those jobs more easily, but not just more easily, better than any of the alternatives. And that's really the essence of user experience, truly understanding the users, what they're trying to accomplish, and designing a system in a way that's best for them. And so I'm using consumer facing applications and websites as examples, but UX, like I mentioned before, has huge implications on business systems as well. So, for example, let's say a company offers a CRM system for account management. They could still have poor adoption because their sales reps view Excel as an easier, more helpful alternative. And let's be honest, Excel is a great platform. And typically, you can make something a lot easier by just whipping up a quick Excel spreadsheet. A lot of times, CRMs out of the box are going to be just as complicated as the job that they're helping you accomplish, which is a pretty complex job. And as long as your users are working outside of your company's systems, you won't have the data you need to run your business well. Conversely, just because users are logging in every day doesn't mean they're actually using it properly and not cutting corners. Often, what we see is that if a user doesn't enjoy using a business system, if they don't rely on that system to do an important job for themselves, they'll simply log in and do the bare minimum required to keep their job. So, we see this as a problem. We need users to enjoy these systems or to view it as a pleasure to allow them to go in and actually use it and use it the way it's meant to be used. But making CRM more valuable than Excel isn't easy. If it was, it wouldn't be an issue for so many different companies. And if you've ever used a really great app that enabled you to perform a complex task, but in a quick and intuitive fashion, a lot of work goes into creating that kind of user experience. Even though it may seem to be a simple solution on the surface, that's by design. And a lot of work goes into that. I actually stole this quote from a really great article that I read. The real purpose of designers is to enable people to take advantage of very complex technology without forcing them to understand how it actually works. And this seems to be the big disconnect in a lot of business applications, that maybe something like a CRM that's helping you to manage all of this different data around your business. The UI that users are working in seems to be just as complex as the underlying mechanisms. And that just can't be the case if we're going to have users enjoy using our systems. It takes real work to make complex business applications a pleasure for end users to interact with. And as a whole, and Skuid as a whole exists to make that work easier, whether by directly increasing the ease to perform some of the bullets listed here, or at the very least, by just enabling you to spend less time developing applications with code and more time on these key design activities. And so there's a lot of bullets up here, and today we're only going to cover a couple of these. And while Skuid impacts the bulk of these bullets, the Design System Studio is a piece of Skuid that directly impacts the ease of creating beautiful interface design and visual design. And I'll show you how today. Okay, so enough of my user experience spiel. Let's jump into talking about the Design System Studio. So whether you're a designer by trade or by necessity, the Design System Studio is going to allow you to create beautiful, cohesive design systems for your Skuid applications without having to write code. Pretty cool. So whether you're a designer by trade or by necessity, Skuid's DSS will enable you to quickly establish a stunning look and feel across your apps fully in line with your brand identity. So before I jump into the demo, I promise I'm getting there. One more slide, I promise. I just feel like it would be helpful to define design system because I'm throwing this term around a lot, and obviously it's baked into the name of the of what I'll be working in today. So let's go ahead and define that. According to Envision's blog, and if you've never heard of Envision app, it's probably, if not the most, one of the most popular product design softwares out there today. And according to their blog, Inside Design, a design system is a collection of reusable components guided by clear standards that could be assembled together to build any number of applications. And I think that sums up exactly what Skuid has set out to accomplish with the DSS. With the Design System Studio, you can quickly define reusable visual artifacts for your apps without writing code, so your apps are on brand every time. So that said, let's go ahead and dive into the demo. All right. So here we are, and I've set up this demo in a very particular way. The Design System Studio on the left, and the actual page that is using this design system on the right. So the page I've built here is for a hypothetical company called UIG Logistics. The account is Acme Corp, and it's a bunch of dummy data. It doesn't mean anything. So, don't try to make any sense out of the data, but rather this is really just to show an environment, a sample environment where this design system might be used. And I think what we can all probably agree, whether or not we like the color green, or whether this is the way we would lay out a particular page like this, it's a pretty pleasing to the eye page to look at. It's the kind of environment that I don't think any of us would mind working in every day. As long as the rest of those user experience bullets were checked off, and this application was helping us to do everything we wanted to do in an application like this, I think it really is a good first impression for an application. And that's ultimately what we're trying to do with our Design System Studio. And we're trying to make that easy. So let's jump into the DSS on the left, and I'll walk you through the interface. I'll walk you through what we've done a bit, and then we'll do some clicking around, and we'll do a test for you guys so you can see it in action. So I'll draw your eye over to the left side of the screen, and let me collapse the component section here and the variables. There are two main pieces to our Design System Studio. There's the variables and there are the components. And so I'll define those for you now. Our components are, if you've spent any amount of time in Skuid, or if you've at least seen it demoed, components are the visual building blocks to a Skuid page. So things like these KPI tiles, the charts and visualizations, the buttons that let us toggle here, the table down here, those are all Skuid components that we have dragged and dropped into the page, and we use those to actually create our apps. And within the Design System Studio, we can actually click through each of these components and even sub parts of components, and we can have granular control over all of those different pieces of our app. So when we talk about building reusable artifacts for our users to, or for our Skuid builders to pull from, this is what we mean. So every time somebody builds a page with a chart in it, they can choose from these two kinds of charts. And hopefully you've designed both of them to be on brand. So you're limiting choices in building so that you can maximize the on brand ness, that's not a word, of your applications. But we've also taken it a step further. So instead of just kind of going one-to-one, going through each of these different pieces of Skuid, each of these different components, and styling them individually, that would get pretty tedious. If you had to create a button and then you wanted to go and you wanted to make a change, you wanted to style a date picker, but you wanted to use the same greens, and you wanted to use the same kind of spacing and maybe the same borders or particular typography, you don't want to have to go in and define that every single time you're going to each of these different components. And so that's where variables come in. Variables are the overarching design elements, I guess, that are going to cascade throughout the rest of your design system. So as you go through and define these different kinds of borders that you can pull from, opacity, variations, shadows, spacing, typography, you basically define everything that's going to be everything that is a part of your brand style guide. And you input it here so that as you go through your components, you can then pull from all those things that are part of your variables, all those things that are in your brand identity palette, I guess. So let me show you an example of what I'm talking about. Let's say I wanted to go into my buttons here, and I wanted to change my primary button here to a darker shade of green. So I'll go over, I'll click on my button. I'm presented with all the different design options for this particular component, and I'll go to background color here. And when I click this drop down, you may not quite notice it right off the bat, but the only colors I'm presented with here within this drop down are actually colors that I've already added up here in my brand colors and functional colors sections within variables. And so what we're doing here is we are encouraging the designer to reuse colors, to keep the color palette they're using consistent across their application. So because users can see this stuff, they can detect this stuff when colors are slightly different, or when lines are really thick in one section and they're really thin in another, and there doesn't seem to be any sort of cohesion there. This is really where brands want to protect these different elements, and they want to make sure that they're all being used the right way. And so that's what we're really encouraging here. But the good thing about this, the good news, is that you don't have to know all of your colors up front. You don't just have to go in and add your colors and then hope you put in all the right ones. You can actually go back to your variables anytime and add additional variants or additional colors. All I'd have to do is click add here. I can give my new color set a label or something like that, and then I can make it whatever I want. So I can make it blue, I can make it green, red, and I can now use this throughout the rest of my design system as I'm styling different components. But I'll go and delete that. So that's really cool. You can always go back and add other versions of borders, opacities, shadows, spacings, typographies, colors. But this idea of additional variations doesn't just stop with variables. You can actually create other style variants for components as well. So an example, let's say we're on our buttons here. And we've got our primary button here that we're kind of seeing used here for this toggle switch, and we're seeing our toggle button, our secondary or default buttons here that are used as some of our actions. We have a destructive button that will be used to say, are you sure you want to delete this record or something like that? Let the user know that it's a destructive action that they're taking. But let's say you need a big fat buy now button or something like that. You're creating some sort of checkout screen and you need a cool gradient on it or something like that. It's a one-off that you're probably only going to use in one scenario, but you need it nonetheless included in your design system. So the great news is you can always go and add a variant. So let me show you another example, and we'll actually create one this time. So let me go down to my navigation, and I want you to notice something. So here, this default navigation here, what I'm seeing is it looks like these navigation items are almost invisible until I hover over them, but they're really just white. And the reason for that is because they're intended to be contrasted against this green header background here on the right side of the screen. But let's say there are also pages where I'm going to be building with a white header background or something like that, and I need dark gray navigation items. Well, all I did here was go up to this button, Add, just like I did in the colors section. I clicked Add. I gave it a title. I gave it a title of dark gray items, and I changed the color to one of the neutral grays that I already had here. And just like that, I was able to create another style variation of this particular header. So let's call this dark gray nav. And if I save this, I can now jump over to my Skuid composing environment. I can refresh the page. Oh, looks like I've been out of Skuid a little too long. Got to log back in here. Perfect. So I'm using this design system DSS test green. And if I go down to my navigation component here in my composer, and I go over to styles, if I click on style variants, I now have dark gray items right here. So I've actually saved that. That is now one of my style variants that I can pull from. I'm not going to do that because dark gray wouldn't look very good against that green header background. So pretty cool stuff. You can create as many different variants as you want for as many one-off scenarios as you want. And typically you'll probably have a couple variants for at least every component, because chances are there's probably going to be some variation in your design system. It's not going to be all green all the time. There's probably going to be some scenarios where you need to tone it down a little bit, and that's okay. The great news is Skuid's design system can accommodate for all of those different scenarios. So we've done this sort of subtle change here. We've seen that we can change nav items. We've seen we can change buttons. But I'd love to show you guys just how dramatically you can change the look and feel of a page or an application just by changing the design system, or really taking some time in here and making some different changes to these different components, like changing the colors, adjusting the shadows, maybe changing a few of the key components like the table and the tab set. There's a lot you can do here. So I've actually already prepared another design system here. Let me go ahead and make sure I'm logged in here. I think I'm okay. I've prepared another design system here, and you'll notice this one has some pretty dramatically different colors. It's called DSS Test Purple as opposed to DSS Test Green, and it's aptly named. Its brand primary is this purple here, and we've got some other options for success and things like that. I've also made some other changes to some different components here. So what I'm going to do, I'm not going to tell you what I changed. I'm just going to apply this new design system to this page here on the right, and we're going to just take a look at how dramatically we can change the look and feel of this page. So to do that, I'm going to jump into my composing environment here, and you can see where the page has been built down here in the canvas area. But in order to change the design system, I click on the top part of the composer, and I click on the page properties. And that's where we actually assign our design system. And I can change it from DSS Test Green to DSS Test Purple. Now, one thing to note, and one thing I'm going to have to do here that you guys probably wouldn't run into very often, but because I'm just changing the design system from one thing to another, there's going to be variants that exist in DSS Test Green, variants for like text and for KPIs and things like that, that don't exist in DSS Test Purple. And so I'm going to have to go through, it won't take very long at all, but I'm going to have to go through my page here and make sure the components that are using those additional variants are pointed at the right ones that I want in DSS Test Purple to make sure it looks nice. So I'll start with my text right here, which is actually my header text right here. So that is a little different in DSS Test Purple. So I'll click on Styles, I'll go down, and I'm going to apply that apply a variant called UIG header. And I'll do the same thing. This responsive grid right here is actually basically the container for my 3 different KPI tiles here. So I've got some different styles for the KPIs themselves. This style variant is called Shadow Wrapper, and that'll make some sense here in a moment. there's some cool shadows I'm applying to those KPI tiles. And then also the text is a little different in this new design system. So let me add KPI header as this style variant. And I'll do the same thing for the body here. The body is these are the actual numbers, the KPIs themselves that we want to draw attention to. So they have their own style variant to make sure they pop a little bit more. So I'm going to add KPI body. And then lastly, I've got a subheader down here that is this account's title right here. So smaller than the full header, but still a title nonetheless. So I want to give that its style variant. So I'll click over to styles, and this is now UIG subheader. And so that's it. All I have to do now is hit save. I'll click over to my UIG logistics page. And before I hit refresh, because once I refresh it, the changes will take effect, just some things for you guys to be looking out for. Pay special attention to the colors, obviously. There's going to be a lot of purple here in a second. Also, the KPI tiles, those are going to change pretty significantly in terms of just the design of them. So we won't have this two-toned look. It's actually going to be more of a single color with some additional colors added to the KPIs themselves. Then we're going to see our tab set change a bit in the way that it is designed. And we're going to see more of a three-dimensional effect because we're adding a few more drop shadows and things of that nature. So pay attention for those. And without further ado, I'll go ahead and hit refresh here. Not sure what was going on there. I'll just preview it from here. Oh, interesting. Well, guys, it wouldn't be a webinar without some technical difficulties. Let's see. Well, that's okay. I don't have to show it to you live. I guess I can actually show it to you in our presentation. I can show you exactly how it ended up looking here. So I'll actually switch back to the deck here. And I'll give you a quick look at what that transformation actually ended up looking like. So on the left, you can see that was the actual the green page that we started on. On the right side is how the page actually did turn out looking if whatever that error was did not occur. So you'll notice some big changes. Obviously, the purple, that's a pretty apparent one. But the KPI tiles, again, they're not this two-toned look. It's kind of a one collective tile itself with purple numbers now instead of white. We've got some cool accent colors in the blue. The tab set isn't containerized here around the labels. It's just sort of this floating line, more of this kind of modern look and feel. So there's a lot of stuff in here. And all we had to do was just apply a new design system. There was no CSS involved. And honestly, there wasn't much time in the composer involved either, which is a pretty key thing to point out, that when you're building with the Design System Studio, you can kind of keep your designers and your Skuid page builders separate if you want to. So some organizations may not necessarily have designers on staff. And so the page builders will probably also end up being the Design System Studio designers as well. But in some organizations, they have on-staff designers, and they may want those people enforcing the design identity of their applications. And so they can actually live in the DSS, while the page builders can live in the Skuid Composer, and they can be operating in tandem without really having to worry about stepping on each other's toes. So that's a pretty cool paradigm that Skuid is creating here. So that said, let's now just jump back to our presentation. And let's just do a quick recap before we actually jump into our questions. That concludes the demo portion of this webinar. So, quick recap. Today, obviously, we took a look at the Skuid Design System Studio. And we talked about the major importance of providing a great user experience for your users when they're using your business applications. And we talked about why that's so important. We also touched on the fact that Skuid exists to make the process of creating that experience dramatically easier. More specifically, the important product design elements we focused on today were the user interface design and the visual design, because those are the two primary elements that the Design System Studio impacts. The DSS enables designers and non-designers alike to create a consumer-grade look and feel for their suite of Skuid apps. We were just looking at this, and we saw this in action. You guys didn't actually get to see the page load, unfortunately, because of some sort of error. But hopefully, the impact of this change still resonates with you guys. We walked through a few key pieces of the DSS, and by just applying a few simple changes, we saw really dramatic results. And with that, let's go ahead and wrap up by just answering whatever questions might be brewing for you guys throughout this presentation. If you have any questions right now and you haven't already typed them in, please go ahead and just type them into the question section. And I'll go ahead and kick it off by answering whatever questions we've got in there right now. Oh, Stuart, I accidentally deleted your question there. If you wouldn't mind resending that one. Okay, we just got a new one in. Okay, is the DSS currently available? If not, when will the DSS be available? Great question. So the DSS should be available, I believe, at the end of Q4. There's not a hard date right now, but I know right now we're currently doing a partner release. So we've got some of our partners testing it and giving us their feedback on it. We want to make sure it's obviously in the finest form when our actual users and customers are working with it. So we're paying special attention to this one, especially since the DSS was released with a brand new set of Skuid components, which we are calling our ink components. The reason why we created those components was, for one, to support some of our different accessibility initiatives. We wanted to be 508 compliant, things like that. We wanted to go ahead and make a really scalable new set of components that we can kind of use well into the future, but also they were designed with the DSS in mind. So that was a big lift for us, but that should be all dropping together toward the end of Q4. All right, we got a couple more questions about the release. Let's see. Here we go. So here's a good question. Would the DSS eliminate the need for the theme builder? That's a great question. And this one is really, again, a question for people that have used Skuid before. And if you're not familiar with the theme builder, it was basically version 1 of the Design System Studio. And the key difference between the two is that the Design System Studio, or I guess I'll start with the theme builder, but theme builder was really designed as a visual style editor, so you didn't have to write CSS to make your Skuid pages look beautiful. And it does its job very well. It's simple to use, and I know I still use it almost every day when I'm building with the version 1 components in Skuid. But the big difference between that and what the DSS offers is that the DSS does a better job of cascading things like colors and fonts and borders and opacities, all those different style variables we were talking about. The DSS really does a better job of cascading that through the rest of your design system and making sure it's consistent, as opposed to in our current theme builder going through each individual component and trying to get it as close as possible, copying and pasting hex codes and trying to keep the borders the same widths and things like that. The DSS has a tool belt for you to pull from, which really increases the ease of building those consistent, cohesive design systems. That's a great question. Let's see. And I guess the second piece of that would be if you are using the new components. Actually, you can have pages in your Skuid instance that use either the old ones or the new ones. It's not an all or nothing switch. And if you are using the new ones in some of your pages, you'll use the Design System Studio for the new component pages, and you'll use the Theme Builder for the old component pages. And then as at your leisure, as you want to move your pages over to that what we're calling V2 version 2 component set, then you would start using the design system and apply your design systems to those new pages. All right. A couple more questions on, is it available? Yes, so conversion of old pages, it's definitely a good question, and we're still kind of on this topic. So what you will see when you update to the newest version of Skuid, when it drops, is that there will be a button in your composing environments that's called Upgrade to V2. And basically what that means is you can upgrade your page, the models, the actions, all that stuff stays the same. The only thing that actually needs to change is the component set, because you'll now need to use the ink components in that page. So I think what I would probably recommend is create a clone of the page you want to convert. Take your time converting that kind of in a separate environment and deploy when you're ready. But again, it by no means needs to be an all at once sort of all at once sort of conversion, if that makes sense. It's incremental is totally supported. Let's see. Here's a question. In a development project, can the Design System Studio and Skuid pages be built simultaneously? Or does DSS configuration need to be completed at the beginning of a project? A great question, seriously. Yeah, that's a really good one. And this is a really cool piece. And it kind of goes back to what I was mentioning before, where designers and Skuid page builders can work in tandem. One does not need to happen before the other. The only thing that needs to happen is the design system that you're pulling from needs to be created. So, when you create a Skuid page, you probably want to reference that. And so as your designer makes changes, those changes will be reflected every time you refresh your Skuid page, essentially. But again, you don't need to create a brand new design system to start building. There's an out-of-the-box one called Ink that you can start using right away. It's very basic. It's almost like you're building with a wireframe. But it's a really great way to get started and start mocking up your pages. Let's see. All right, so I've got a question here. If you're about to start building with Skuid, should you wait until Spark is released? Do you suggest a path that won't be wasted when Spark release comes out? Also a great question. Yeah, so honestly, I don't see a reason to wait, to be perfectly honest, because the truth is, the majority of your page will stay the same. Your actions and your models and all that won't change. It'll really just be the components. So I think in addition to that, you can also deploy both version 1 pages and version 2 pages to your users simultaneously. So they can definitely coexist, and you can sort of take your time converting the ones you've built before. So I think if you have a project you want to start now, by all means, go ahead and start building it. And you can always worry about converting later. But I don't think it should hold you back for right now. All right, we've got one last question. Let's see. Yes, here's a good question. Is it a free upgrade? Yes. So the Skuid Ink components, the Design System Studio, it's all part of the core Skuid suite. So it's not an add-on or anything like that. It is just something that's included in Skuid when you upgrade to the newest release when that is out. Great questions, everybody. This has really been a pleasure. Thank you so much for
And Sam, just one more question. What was the name of the book that you referenced earlier in your presentation for design?
Sure, that was. Let me jump back to that. It's called About Face: The Essentials of Interaction Design.
Thank you.
You bet. All right, guys. Well, thank you for joining today. It's been a pleasure. Always happy to geek out about the Skuid Design System Studio. I think it's a huge improvement to the way we build Skuid pages, and we're only continuing to improve that whole experience. So, thanks again for joining, and we look forward to hearing from you soon.